Commercial real estate credit crunch. So what we're looking at here is the chart of the week. And, I just had a look at the latest Fed Loan Officer Survey. That's a survey that the Fed puts out usually around its Fed meetings. It's a quarterly survey. It asks bank loan officers basically if the bank has been changing its lending policies or if they're seeing any changes in demand or pricing and so on and so forth. And well, the key point really is that things are not looking good for what is a heavily credit-driven sector. Banks are tightening up on credit criteria, they're raising loan pricing, and generally reporting weaker demand for new loans. This appears to be the story across the board. So for business loans, commercial and industrial, mortgages, consumer debt. But one sector I would say many people overlook stands out to me in particular, and that's commercial real estate, and that's the topic of this week's chart. We saw something similar happen with regards to all this tightening back in 2008. We can see that on the chart there in terms of the red line there. So if the red line's going down, that means lending standards are tightening. I've actually inverted that. But that was a different time with a different regulatory backdrop and different way of doing business. This time is different. It definitely is different, but not necessarily in a good way. In 2020, we also saw a similar crunch in credit conditions. We saw a plunge in expected demand or perceived demand by the banks and a very sharp tightening of lending standards around the pandemic panic. And some would highlight that particular instance is a reason to ignore this chart and that it didn't foretell sort of a rough time ahead for commercial real estate. But of course, back then you had the fiscal plus monetary emergency super stimulus coming to save the day, and so instead of commercial real estate prices falling, they actually jumped at that time. Basically, stimulus works. This time around, we have more of a gradual and pernicious weakening of activity rather than that pandemic shock overnight shutting down of the economy. It's something that looks and feels a bit more like your traditional recession this time around. And we also have an interest rate shock and globally coordinated or coincident monetary tightening. There's also lingering uncertainty around the occupancy rates with regards to the post-pandemic world, work from home and so on and so forth, the shock to expenses on a number of fronts. And so I would say there are considerable headwinds, considerable downside risks looming for commercial real estate, and really with few mitigating factors. Any kind of mitigating factors that we can come up with, they might be some time away, like, lower interest rates. That's probably still some ways off yet. So definitely a risk to be wary of with regards to commercial real estate itself, but also with regards to things that are sort of tied to that. So obviously REITs, but also the banks themselves. So a key point there is this crunch in credit conditions is going to be weighing heavily on the outlook for commercial real estate.